Welcome to The Market That Moves America, a podcast from the National Center for the Middle Market. The center is the leading source of knowledge, leadership, and innovative research on the middle market economy. Throughout our podcast, we will feature middle market leaders and stakeholders to hear their real-world perspectives on trends and emerging issues.
Middle market businesses often play important roles in the supply chains of other companies. But is that largely a domestic issue, or do these businesses operate on a global scale? We wanted to explore that, so the National Center for the Middle Market partnered with Ohio State's Office of Global Business and CIBER to conduct a new study on global supply chain management in the middle market. We won't be talking about technology, data, or security, as CIBER is an acronym that stands for Center for International Business Education and Research, and I'm pleased to be talking with Mike Knemeyer, Fisher College faculty member and academic director for the CIBER.
Welcome to The Market That Moves America. My name is Doug Farron, Managing Director for the National Center for the Middle Market, located at The Ohio State University, Fisher College of Business. Today's episode is going to be a bit about global business, a bit about supply chain management, a bit about the education process. The NCMM recently partnered with the Fisher College of Business CIBER, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what that means. And here to discuss that with me today is Dr. Mike Knemeyer. Mike is an Ohio State professor here at the Fisher College of Business and also serves as the academic director of the Center for International Business Education and Research. That is what the CIBER acronym stands for. So, Mike, welcome to our podcast.
Great to be here and excited to talk with you about this important topic. As you mentioned, I'm a professor in logistics, and I serve as the academic director for the CIBER, Center for International Business Education and Research. My undergraduate degree is from John Carroll University up in Cleveland, and I earned my doctorate from the University of Maryland. In terms of some industry experience, I've worked in positions with Annixter Brothers, who's a distributor of electrical products up in Solon, Ohio. And I also worked for CSX, which is a U.S. rail company that a lot of people are familiar with. I've also worked at a couple other universities over the years since I graduated from Maryland. But I'm really proud to say that I'm going on 20 years. This is my 20th year at Ohio State. My current research areas are in the areas of supply chain relationship management, and that's probably my primary differentiator in terms of my research. That's what I've been doing since my dissertation. And I'm also working on enhancing supply chain resilience, and that's been largely driven by some activities with my doctoral students. One other thing I like to mention in my introduction is, I'm born and bred Buckeye. I was actually born on campus over at our outstanding medical center, and I like to say being a Buckeye is in my blood. So again, it's great to be here with you today, and I'm excited to talk to you about this topic.
Yeah, thanks. So let's start with the very first question, which I know I get a lot of questions about this. Can you describe exactly what is CIBER? Because I know, CIBER is the acronym. When I reference it just in conversation, people immediately think of cybersecurity or something to do with technology, but it's not that. So first of all, can you just tell us about what CIBER is?
Yes, CIBER is something I have to explain all the time also. And you're right. While we are not CYBER, we do talk about cyber issues in across the globe. But CIBERs are a competitive federal grant. They are administered by the U.S. Department of Education. And what the DOE does is they award a select number of these grants to universities across the U.S. To hopefully increase our country's international competitiveness. That's the goal of the program. In fact, there's only 16 CIBERs across the U.S., and we were the only new CIBER that was awarded in this last granting period. Fisher CIBER was awarded $1.2 million distributed over the 4 years of the grant. And with that funding, we are implementing 46 unique international business-focused initiatives. We're focused on serving students, faculty, businesses of all sizes, including middle market firms, as well as the larger workforce across our region. Each university that receives a CIBER grant is is supposed to leverage their distinct strengths, and then we as a network hopefully are a very strong entity for the United States. And one of the things that differentiates our cyber from other universities is that we have the National Center for the Middle Market right next door to the Office of Global Business. So as we were thinking through the grant proposal and thinking about how we might build a winning proposal, we definitely wanted to include the NCMM in that as a point of distinction for us. And we built one of our 4 guiding themes of our center around this connection, and we're very pleased that we did that because we do feel like it was a differentiator for us. The other themes in our proposal were built around exploring global trade, resolving global supply chain and logistics challenges, and building talent pipelines. So as you can tell from my mentioning of the NCMM and some of the themes I've already highlighted as other parts of our proposal, this relationship with your organization was an integral part of what we wanted to accomplish as a cyber. And one outcome of this partnership has been this research on international supply chains for middle market firms, which I'm really excited to talk to you about today.
Yeah, that's really important to mention all those things. And on behalf of the NCMM, I mean, anytime we have the chance to explore these topics on behalf of middle market companies, it certainly creates a lot more awareness and creates, certainly based on survey data, some data-driven insights. Maybe Mike, you could talk a little bit too about just the overall lack of research on mid-sized companies. I mean, I know that's something that our center tries to do, but even within academic circles, I'm sure middle market isn't maybe one of the top areas that are typically studied and researched.
Yeah, it really is an underappreciated part of our economy and a very critical part of it. I've been very lucky being at Fisher and having been connected even prior to my role with cyber, with doing research for the NCMM over the years, and really gained an appreciation for the distinctiveness of this segment and the importance for our economy. So yeah, I'm hoping that through our efforts jointly and getting our research out there, that more faculty will be interested in doing some specific research in this area.
Yep, agreed. So you just touched on the fact that both of these centers, the NCMM, the CIBER, I mean, even the Office of Global Business here at the college, are really important in driving research and knowledge. Just tell us about the overall importance of the need for more international business research.
Well, the world is a more connected place today. It's more connected than it's ever been before. We have technologies that are making it much easier to conduct business internationally. We can collaborate across borders. While globalization has been a topic of discussion recently, in my opinion, it's here to stay. It's going to change. It's going to evolve like everything evolves, but it's part of what doing business in the world today is about. So the question is for companies, and whether it's a middle market company or another company, is not if you should participate in international markets, but more importantly, how to participate in these markets. So Fisher Cyber, is really critically important to allowing us to do international business research into areas that companies are going into today, that are navigating challenges that they're facing in their global supply chains, pressures on their labor markets, lack of talent, trends in the markets, things like technologies that are emerging and how it's going to affect international business. You think about blockchain and AI. Mm-hmm. So the cyber network that I'm part of and our center is part of is really hoping to support small and medium-sized business firms seeking to develop overseas markets. And our network strives to develop educational programs. We do export training. We collect market information. We try to build out response strategies to international competition. We like to fund projects, do events. We had Catherine Tai, the U.S. Trade Ambassador, come talk to Fisher. We like to put out publications around key issues in this international area, and this research is one of those things that we've we've definitely highlighted as part of our efforts. And in the last 5 years, this global business environment has changed dramatically. And the research really needs to keep up with that. And we're hopeful that the cyber here at Ohio State is going to help provide new insights and intelligence for companies that are facing these changing business rules that are out there. And I think the collaboration with the NCMM is really an excellent example of how we can create new business knowledge and get it out to the market quickly. That's one of the things I struggle with in academic research. It takes so long for those insights to get out to the market. Where I'm real happy with our research is very timely and is going to be out there very quickly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, from the NCMM standpoint, a lot of the topics that we look at are related to growth, and the international opportunities are typically ones that have been maybe a little bit not ignored, but the fact that there can be a little bit daunting and there's a lot of uncertainty. And so the fact that we can contribute some insights as to how these companies might, address some of the risks and challenges that they're going to face should they choose to go to new international markets, I think is really important as these companies think about, particularly if they feel like they're tapped out here in the US and the domestic market, what are some of the other options that they might have? So with that, I mean, you were deeply involved in the design of the survey and the project itself. So could you spend a few minutes maybe walking us through the research findings and in particular some of the key insights and things that stood out for you?
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about how we conducted the research. And, I'd like to, first of all, thank you and the NCMM for being such a great partner on this effort. It's very refreshing to work so collaboratively with your team and work across groups to develop a research product that I really think is valuable for both of our constituents. So as we began thinking about the project, we both wanted to make sure that the research was focused on issues that were at the intersection of our two groups and connected across the goals of our two groups. We also wanted to make sure it was a current challenge that was being faced by U.S. middle market companies. So I think after some deliberation and a couple of other ideas we floated, we ended up deciding to focus on building a better understanding of advantages, challenges, best practices involved with middle market companies operating international supply chains. And it seems like we're reminded daily of just how complex these international supply chains are and how they surround all types of business. And I think taking a closer look at this complexity through the lens of such an important segment of the U.S. economy made a great deal of sense for both of us. So while there were many different directions we could take the research, I think what we did was we prioritized this focus in on the middle markets and supply chains and really understanding, building upon your expertise with conducting these types of research studies with things such as the middle market indicator. I thought that, again, you bringing that expertise and those resources and us bringing that global business perspective really made for a great partnership. So we decided to conduct a national survey of middle market companies, and we wanted to look at both companies that were selling products and also companies that were sourcing products internationally, and depending upon these international supply chains. We thought both perspectives would provide interesting insights and also provide us a chance to compare across the two groups. So we've interviewed over 400 middle market supply chain leaders, decision makers. These are companies that are active in international supply chains. We gathered their insights on company performance, supply chain practices. We got their views on current landscape of international supply chain management. And the key insights emerged from the interviews, and we identify in our report 5 key themes from the data that we collected. And while I won't give you all the themes or won't talk to you about all the themes, I might highlight a couple. If you want to read about all the themes, you'd be sure to pick up the research report for the full story. I'll put a plug in for you to go to the websites and download the report. But I'll highlight a couple of the themes. One of the clear themes was that international supply chain delivers financial advantages for middle market companies. And you think about, when we talk to these middle market supply chain leaders, they said, revenue growth is a real financial benefit for their companies when they engage in these international activities. They also mentioned market expansion, gaining cost savings, and establishing a competitive advantage in their markets. And one of the other interesting things they mentioned, which I thought was something I wasn't necessarily expecting, was that these international sales activities actually help provide better support for their domestic customers, and that was an interesting insight from the research. Two other themes I might highlight are related in the fact that they both relate to supply chain resilience. We found that international supply chains introduce a lot of complexities and risks, and these frequently will lead to disruptions. And middle market companies are also addressing these risks and really trying to recover quickly from these disruptions. So, our data is showing that 68% of the purchasers and over 70% of the sellers have experienced some type of supply chain disruption in the last 12 months. These disruptions can be from geopolitics, natural disasters, production issues, distribution issues. But one of the things that I was heartened to hear was that even though they're facing these disruptions, most middle market companies we spoke to indicated these disruptions were only having minor impacts, that they were confident that their supply chains were very resilient. And again, these insights were something that we just hadn't heard, because we don't typically hear that voice of the middle market.
Yeah, and how timely too, given the recent tragic accident in Baltimore. Obviously the lives lost and all of those things were terrible, and I just immediately thought to that being a perfect example of a disruption in the movement of goods and the trickle down effect that's going to have across a number of different sectors that rely on that port.
I think supply chain resilience, and as a supply chain scholar, and I'm very lucky to be at Ohio State, which has this long-standing logistics and supply chain program that's been built by some great professors over the years: Bud Lalonde, Doug Lambert, Martha Cooper, and just continuing today with some really outstanding colleagues that I work with. And you're right. You kind of mentioned it's sort of, you hate to be be recognized when bad things are happening, but with all the things going on with COVID and more recently with some of the conflicts in Ukraine and Baltimore, the issues there, it really has brought a focus to supply chains. And what I love about my role at CIBER is I can take this, my love for international business and combine it with my research interests in supply chain and look at some very interesting issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the, I know you didn't specifically mention it, but it's within the report, and I certainly encourage all of our listeners to go and read the full report. But in other studies that we've done across the middle market, whether it's about technology or different processes or functions or capabilities, I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's all about the talent and the workforce and the people that you have that are there to kind of drive and manage these things. And one of the findings showed that companies oftentimes they struggle to find people that have the right skill sets to work internationally. So, Mike, what type of role do you think, we're at a university, what do you think higher education can do to help solve or address some of those talent-focused issues?
Well, I think the report points out there's clearly a need for employees with technical and soft skills needed to conduct successful international supply chain operations and business. And this is an opportunity for programs such as CIBER and the NCMM to help meet those needs for U.S. companies and U.S. middle market firms. Language proficiency was one of the things that came out in the report as being, particularly critical for international awareness and cultural competence. And we've been actively working in our center and with other members of the CIBER network to improve the preparation of our business students in these areas. And it was nice to see, and not nice that there's still those needs. I'd hope that we're meeting those needs a little bit better than we probably are at the moment. But it is reassuring to see that some of the things that we've been working on are are issues that the market firms have identified. So here at Fisher and more broadly at Ohio State and across the cyber network across this country, we're really trying to develop a set of initiatives to help students develop their global mindset. And this development of a global mindset is something that's specifically spelled out in our Fisher strategic plan, and it really serves as a guiding light for all the activities of our Office of Global Business. And I'm very happy to report, that we're doing a lot of things in this area to really try to internationalize our education for our students. We're working in the business curriculum. We're trying to develop courses that are cutting across disciplines and trying to infuse those courses with international business issues. We're trying to up the international content. This report is something that we will share with faculty, and hopefully that will be worked into the lectures that they're making to our students. We're working on trying to find creative ways to connect our students internationally, whether it be through study abroad programs, collaborative online international learning, which is using technology to connect our students across the globe with other students in other parts of the world so that they can start to develop that cultural awareness. We're trying to help faculty. We're doing training programs from faculty where we send faculty and provide some funding to help them go on trips around the world. There's a program at the University of Washington where they're actually tracing the global supply chain for apples and going to Vietnam, and we've been working with them to maybe get involved a little bit more with some of that activity, or maybe try to duplicate that activity here in Ohio. So we're doing a lot of stuff with students. We're doing a lot of stuff with faculty. We're also, I think something that came out in the report was this need for language. And I know that our Office of Global Business and our cyber group have been really trying to find ways to collaborate more effectively with our foreign language departments and area study centers that we have on campus, trying to build out language courses for our students and even provide some language training and culture training for business people. Yep. And again, all these efforts really highlight just how our research with NCMM is really aligned with what the needs are being identified.
Yep. I know you and I have both had the chance to travel internationally with students. And for me, it's always almost universal how these groups it's almost embarrassing that that English is spoken so broadly in all of these countries, and yet we put very little effort toward understanding the cultures that we visit. That has been almost every trip I've ever taken. That has been one of the key things that the students tell me after the fact is, I wish I would have put more time into understanding and appreciating these different cultures that we're visiting.
And something like Duolingo is a wonderful tool. I use it every day. I'm trying to work on my German, but one of the things that it doesn't do for me or for students is it doesn't build that cultural awareness. It doesn't build that context of business and how do you negotiate across languages. And I think making some investment in that is going to continue to be important.
Yep. So my last question for you, Mike, what advice would you give to middle market company leaders if, maybe they might be considering entering an international market, or maybe they've just started the process, they may be struggling or have a lot of questions? What would be your advice on ways that they could, engage in that process better, or tips, advice, things they could do?
Okay, yeah, a couple of things come to my mind. First, be sure to go in with your eyes open. Understand that international supply chains are more challenging to manage than domestic supply chains. I just think that's a fact. International supply chains have more complex communications. There's more complexity in terms of the logistics that you have to manage. The lead times tend to be a lot longer. There's regulatory issues you're dealing with. There's currency fluctuations that you're dealing with. And understanding that those differences are significant but overcomable is something I would want companies to keep in mind. I'd also sort of reiterate some of the ideas that were put forth by Bob Grody, who was a company who served as a case study in our report. I won't give away all the insights that Bob was able to provide, and I know you're appreciative, and I'm definitely appreciative of his involvement in the report. Grote is a mid-sized company, does industrial food slicing and assembly equipment. They've got a major global footprint, and to hear his perspectives from that middle market, he stated in the report, if you aren't growing, you're dying. And as a professor, I love that perspective, because I always tell my students that, and I think our study really provides strong support that engaging in international supply chains can be a significant source of growth for middle market firms. And while this engagement can be challenging, and there's definitely things that you need to thoughtfully consider, those who pursue this path have indicated that they are realizing financial benefits from doing it. I think the other thing that Bob mentioned in his case study that I really sort of gravitated to was, he said, his company didn't just dip their toe in when going global; they dove in. And I would push companies that are listening to this, or companies that read our report, don't let the differences that exist in international supply chains scare you away. There's lots of resources out there, resources such as the NCMM. There's the CIBER network, including the Fisher CIBER. Even our Fisher College of Business has an award-winning export internship program where companies can work with us to gain advice, to gain insights on how to get started in international business. So, global business opportunities are going to come in a multitude of forms and shapes, and can be from any part of the world. But being open to those opportunities and not shying away from them, and developing an approach that addresses and tailors the distinctions across these global markets, I think will set you up for success.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate your partnership, your leadership in helping us drive this project home. We're really excited about it, and this has been a great discussion today. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
For more information about this new study, if you'd like to see it, download it, read it, please visit our website, which is middlemarketcenter.org. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to The Market That Moves America. Never miss a new episode by subscribing anywhere podcasts can be found. You can also subscribe to our email newsletter at middlemarketcenter.org.